What's happening, my fellow women's football fans? I'm Bryce, and this is the Women's Soccer/Football Podcast, where we talk about all the glorious things that go on in the world of WOSO, including the FAWSL, the NWSL, the US Women's National Team, and many, many more. So, welcome for those of you who are new and who are returning. If you guys are new here and you like what you're hearing, seeing, and want to follow along a lot more, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and also check us out on TikTok, Instagram, and all the other social media platforms that you absolutely love to use, which, of course, I'll link down right into the description below. But guys, a lot has gone on in the world of WOSO, especially today. The WSL fixtures are all done and dusted for the weekend, and everything went absolutely nuts. I think I'm going to title this episode City Strikes Back. For some reason, when I think of Manchester City, I think of the Galactic Empire of Star Wars, which if any of you like Star Wars, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But that is neither here nor there. Let's get right into it. First, let's set the scene for this podcast. For those of you who are watching this for the first time, I usually like to start off by setting the scene of my surroundings, because some of you might be listening to this on audio. If you would like to listen to this on the go, you certainly have that option too. I will link those down in the description below as well. But anyways, so we're recording this episode on Sunday, February 7th. It is approximately 11:50 in the a.m. Between the games, I had the opportunity to go to Dunkin' Donuts today, which is absolutely wonderful. I had a pink velvet latte for the second time, and oh my god, guys, is it glorious. If you would like a sweet drink to just give you a nice warm hug when it's freezing cold out like it is right now, that is definitely what I went with. I got a large. It was absolutely glorious. I also just followed that up with a cup of cocoa in my mug that says, "Coffee is a hug in a mug." It was absolutely wonderful. Like I said, a little cold here in the Midwest where I'm at right now. It's about -3. It was -3 degrees Fahrenheit when I went out to Dunkin' this morning. And it hasn't really warmed up since. I had to chip some ice off of my car. It was a wild time, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. There are strip lights in my room right now that are currently set to a light blue for Manchester City, being the only top 4 team that won today, and it's not because they all played each other, so City definitely took advantage of their chances today, and we'll get to that in just a little while. But now that you guys have an idea of my surroundings in the world that I'm currently shooting this podcast in, let's talk some segments. So, for those of you who are new to the podcast, I usually like to start this podcast off by going into some small segments before getting into our main topics for the episode. So, let's start off with the first segment today. We're going to change it up a little bit today. We're going to start off with some small news tidbits. So, on Saturday, February 6th, Catarina Macario made her Olympique Lyonnais debut. Olympique Lyonnais won by a scoreline of 2-1 against Montpellier in Division 1 Feminine. I've heard it called Division 1 Arkema a couple times. I think that might be the actual formal name for it, but I don't know if Arkema is like a sponsor or what, because I know, like, for example, for the FAWSL Barclays, it's the Barclays Women's Super League. That's their main sponsor. So I'll have to look deeper into that. But nonetheless, Catarina Macario made her debut for the club. I don't believe she scored or anything like that, but she was able to come onto the pitch and get some playing time right away in her debut, so that was really, really exciting. The other news line, which I'll talk about a little bit more in depth, Chelsea have lost. That's right, they lost this morning to Brighton Hove Albion by a scoreline of 2-1, thus ending, I believe, their 2-year unbeaten run. I believe they've gone 2 calendar years in the WSL without losing up until today. So, wow, that's huge. I'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in just a minute. And because we have so much to talk about in our main topics, I think I'm going to keep that segment short. That is the small news tidbits that have gone on in the last few days. Guys, what are your main headlines for the world of WoW? So feel free to jump down in the comments and let me know. Let's get into the second segment then, which is going to be just updating y'all on the FAWSL Golden Boot race. So let's take a look, and I'll pull up the list here. We have, starting with the top scorers, then I'll go into our assist leaders. Viviane Miedema of Arsenal Women's Football Club is still leading the line in the first position with 12 goals. However, several other players are starting to creep up in the list and get close to her. So Sam Kerr is one of those. She is in second with 10 goals. She scored today against Brighton Hove Albion. She was the lone goal for Chelsea. She's got 10 goals. In third, we've got her teammate Franessa Kirby. Or actually, no, I'm sorry, it's not Franessa Kirby. It's just Fran Kirby. She's got 8 goals on the season so far. In third, tied for third now, is Ellen White of Manchester City with 8 goals. And then in tied for 5th, we've got Caitlin Ford and Jill Roord, each with 7 goals apiece. I'll actually trickle all the way down into the 7th position in the top goal scorers table. That includes Chloe Kelly of Manchester City and then Ella Toone and Leah Galton of Manchester United. They are in 7th in the league in scoring, all tied with 6 goals apiece. So it's becoming more and more evident that some players are starting to catch up to Vivian Miedema there in first. However, Arsenal still have got 2 goals in hand, or 2 games in hand, I'm sorry. So that could very well change down the stretch, especially if Viv gets into form. However, Sam Kerr's been clicking on all cylinders, I'd say, over the course of the past month and a half, so we'll see that they'll make the race a little bit more tight down the stretch since we've got 9 match weeks left. And now Ellen White's starting to light it up for City too, and City's been scoring like crazy. So it should be interesting to see how the WSL Golden Boot race will shape up in the back half of the season. Let's get into the top assist leaders on the season. So Chloe Kelly had 2 assists today for Manchester City, and she climbed into the top spot for the assist leaders. She now has 8 assists. In second, we've got Katie McCabe of Arsenal with 7 assists. In third, we've got Beth Mead, also of Arsenal, with 6 assists. And fourth, we've got Caitlin Ford, also of Arsenal, with 5 assists. And then tied for 5th, we have 7 players tied for 5th in assists in the WSL. And they all have 4. This includes Fran Kirby of Chelsea, Izzy Christensen of Everton, Jordan Nobbs of Arsenal, Erin Cuthbert of Chelsea, Lucy Bronze of Manchester City, Hayley Add of Manchester United, and Emma Mitchell of Reading. Wow, that is a lot of people tied for one particular category. I got to give Chloe Kelly a lot of credit. She has been lighting it up on the right wing for Manchester City. Like I said, over the course of like the last 6 weeks, they've all just been clicking like crazy. So I'm not surprised to see her climb up this list. And she is not only the top assist leader now, she's also climbing up into the top goal scorers table. She's got 6 goals. So looking pretty interesting going down the stretch here. So we'll see how that ends up playing out. I'm starting to favor Chloe Kelly a little bit more in that assist race because it doesn't seem like Arsenal have a whole lot doing so far given their current run of form. So we'll see how that goes. Ladies and gentlemen, who do you think will be the Golden Boot winner or the top assist leader come the end of the WSL season? Feel free to jump down into the comments below and let me know who you got. All right, so with that second segment down and out of the way, let's get into the third and final segment before we get into our main topics, which is going to be my new favorite segment, which is going to be the moment of silence. This is essentially a toast to anything that you would like to dedicate to the world of women's football. I like to take what I think is the most significant thing going on between episodes and dedicate my moment of silence to that. So let me raise my nice coffee mug, which has coffee as a hug in a mug, and dedicate the moment of silence to Chelsea Women's Football Club, who just ended their 2-year unbeaten run in the WSL. It's heartbreaking to see when an unbeaten run goes down like that. However, it is nonetheless impressive that you're able to keep a streak that long alive. Even just the fact that they have gone this long in the WSL season going unbeaten just for this season is absolutely impressive. So full credit to them, fair play to them. Congrats on their unbeaten run, but heartbroken for them for their loss. So on the count of 3, let's take our moment of silence. 1, 2, 3. Salute. All right, guys, that feels right. Who did you dedicate your moment of silence to for this podcast episode? Feel free to jump down in the comments below and let me know. All right, so that'll do it for the segments for this podcast thus far. The reason I kept that a little bit shorter this time around is because I wanted to get into our main topics because with all the WSL things that have gone on, I wanted to make sure we had enough time for all of them as well. First, before we get into all of the WSL things, I wanted to do something a little bit different for this first main topic and shift over to a all-decade team that was released this week. So this first main topic is going to be the IFFHS all-decade team. This organization is the International Football Historical Honors Society, I think. Let me double check what IFFHS stands for. Bear with me 1 second. The International Federation of Football for History, and my computer will just hurry up a little bit. And stats, I believe. My computer's being a little bit slow, so we'll just Oh, wait, it's coming up. It's just a really long acronym. What it stands for doesn't matter. But anyways, they released their all-decade team just a couple days ago, and it was a really hot topic of debate in our Discord chat, and it was kind of fun to just talk about it, so I wanted to share it with you all on the podcast. So what this team is for the years 2011 to 2020, this organization took what they thought were the best 11 players and put them into this team for all to see. Who did the list include? Well, it had one goalkeeper, four defenders, three midfielders, and three forwards. Um, these lists are always a little bit interesting because how they choose them is always ambiguous, but we'll talk about that in a second. But like I said, who's on it? Well, the goalkeeper was Hope Solo. The defenders were Lucy Bronze, Wendy Renard, Saki Kumagai, Nilla Fisher. For the midfielders, we had Jennifer Morotson, Lena Gosling, and Carly Lloyd. And then for the forwards, we had Alex Morgan, Ada Hegerberg, and Marta of Brazil. So those are the players that they ended up choosing, which really interesting list. I, by and large, don't have a ton of problems with it. It's really difficult because I haven't been following women's football for that entire decade. It's only been about a year or so that I've been really deeply following women's football, so I can't really speak to many of the players that are on the list. However, I will just give some thoughts, but take them with a grain of salt as I kind of just analyze this list a little bit. First, we'll start off going back to front. We'll start off with Hope Solo in the goalkeeper position. I have no issue with Hope Solo being the goalkeeper of the decade, especially for this team. She's the GOAT. By and large, there's no better goalkeeper in the history of women's football than Hope Solo, and I think that seems to be pretty unanimous amongst many experts and pundits in the field. I I can't. No other names really come to mind for the entire decade from 2010 to 2020, and also just in the history of women's football. Hope Solo is number one, and she seems to be widely regarded that way. So it seems like the obvious choice for this position. If you can think of a different goalkeeper that might have performed better this decade, feel free to put it down in the comments below. But I think the arguments would be pretty difficult to convince many otherwise that Hope Solo would be on this list. So jumping up into the defenders, let's start off with Lucy Bronze. Let's do the low hanging fruit with Lucy Bronze. Seems like a really clear choice for this particular list too. She has been winning Player of the Year awards from multiple organizations and multiple competitions across two of the best teams in the world of women's soccer, arguably Olympique Lyonnais and Manchester City being the main two. She's been on Team of the Year awards for last several years from all over the place, from UEFA, from the WSL, from FIFA. I mean, it seems like she is the clear-cut choice for the team of the decade, so I've really got no issue with that. She just won the FIFA Women's Player of the Year this year for 2020, so I mean, it's not really too. I can't think of a better player to put into this defender role than Lucy. And then moving on to Wendy Renard, who currently plays for Olympique Lyonnais and the French women's national team. No issue here from me. The main reason is she's been part of the FIFA Pro World 11, which is a pretty prestigious award for the last 5 years. Barring 2018, she wasn't in the list for 2018, but that means for, let's see, 2016, 2017, 2019, 2020, and I believe 2015, she was on the FIFA Pro World 11. When you are on that prestigious of a team for 5 years, that's half the decade, it kind of becomes a clear choice that, yeah, you were probably one of the better players of this decade, if not one of the best defenders of this decade. So I have no problem including Wendy Renard in this particular case. Moving on to Saki Kumagai and Nilla Fisher. I'm going to kind of group these two together because this is one of those cases where I don't really know a ton about each player. I know Saki Kumagai plays for Olympique Lyonnais, which in by itself adds to your resume because it's tough to play in that squad and play really well. I based my argument for a lot of these players based on awards they've won, just because stats are hard to come by and they're always a little ambiguous depending on where you get them from. So my metric for a lot of these is awards, but Saki Kumagai and Nilla Fisher, they don't seem to really have a ton of awards that would back their case to be part of this all-decade team strongly. However, I'm sure there's a lot of you listening and watching this right now that could probably vouch for them a little bit deeper than I could. So admittedly, there's not really a ton I could see as to why they should be in the list, but then again, I don't know of any players that might trump them in this list, so to speak. I can think of a couple players for the U.S. Women's National Team, like Becky Sauerbrunn, who's been playing very well for the U.S. all decade long. But however, like I said, without deeper knowledge about Saki Kumagai and Nilla Fisher, it kind of doesn't make my argument complete, if that makes sense. So if any of you guys know more about either of these two players and think that they should be in the list, feel free to jump down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Or if they shouldn't be in the list and other players have gotten snubbed for this list in the defender role, feel free to let me know that as well. So then with the defenders and goalkeeper out of the way, that brings us into the midfielders. So like I said earlier, Jennifer Morotzen, who plays for Germany currently, Leah Gosling, and Carly Lloyd. We'll start off with Jennifer. She plays for Germany. She has been widely regarded as one of the best midfielders in the world today. A lot of people would probably say top 5, and I would agree at this point. This is kind of the same case as Lucy Bronze, winning Player of the Year awards from multiple different organizations, UEFA, Germany, wherever pretty much she goes. I'm trying to think of a good way to frame this argument. There's so many players in this list, but by and large, she's been winning Player of the Year awards from multiple places. And when you've got diverse leagues and organizations giving you Player of the Year's award over the course of the last decade, that's a pretty good indicator. Like, a lot of people widely regard you as one of the better players, thus you belong in this list for the decade. So it's really not a huge surprise to me that Jennifer was in this list. And she's been in I'm trying to remember which World 11 she's been in. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, she has been in the I'm even forgetting the acronym, the IFFHS World 11 team every year since 2017. So 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, the last 4 years in a row, she has been in the same organization's World 11. So it's no surprise that if she made it for the yearly World 11 for about half the decade, that she would make the decade team as well. So I'm not really surprised that they picked her for this particular award, and I don't really have any qualms with it. I don't have any problems with it. She's a very good player and has been for a long time. Moving on to the other side of the midfield, Leah Gosling. This one is another mystery to me. I don't really know a ton about her. Looking at her pedigree and her awards, there's not really a ton there that I could definitively say, oh yeah, she certainly belongs in this list. I would contend there's probably better midfielders than Lena in this particular case, but like I said, without me knowing a lot more about her, I can't complete my argument. Like, I could say that just even dating back to 2015, if Lauren Holiday probably played through for the rest of the decade, she probably could have made a strong case for herself, but like I said, I'll just leave it at I don't really know a ton about Lena, so if any of you do and would like to support or maybe give some other midfielders that should be in her shoes, feel free to jump it down in the comments below, and of course, let me know. I like promoting dialogue like that. It makes this a lot more fun. And then thirdly, we've got Carly Lloyd. I really don't have a ton of problems with Carly Lloyd being in this list. She had probably the best performance ever in a big competition final, like in history, like across a lot of different major sports too. Providing a little bit of context around that, she had a hat trick in the 2015 World Cup final against Japan. It was a phenomenal performance. I think one that'll be very hard to best. It will be bested someday, just by who and when, we have no idea. But she's gotten a ton of goals this decade. She has proved that she can be one of the most versatile players in the world. She has helped the U.S. go to glory pretty much all decade long. I don't really see a huge problem with her being in this list. I think Carly Lloyd is going to go down as one of the greatest players of all time in the world of WOSO. I think she has been more of an international star than she has been a club star. You could make that case for a lot of U.S. women's national team players. It seems like they more shine at the international stage than the club stage, but I think Carly Lloyd has shined so well internationally that she definitely deserves to be in this list. But if you guys have any other midfielders that maybe have gotten snubbed and should be in this list, feel free to jump down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts, of course. Moving on to the last group, which is going to be the forwards. Like I said earlier, we've got Alex Morgan, Ada Hegerberg, and Marta. We'll start off with Alex Morgan. So over the course of the decade, Alex Morgan has scored 109 goals, and that's just for the U.S. women's national team alone. In that time, she was the CONCACAF best player. She won the FIFA Pro World 11 3 times. When you're scoring that many goals and you're on that prestigious list 3 times throughout the course of the decade, it's really hard to say otherwise that she shouldn't be on this list. I couldn't no other forwards really came to mind that have performed super, super well for the entire decade as well as Alex Morgan has. She scored some really big goals at the international stage and at the best, highest levels against the best teams. I don't have a problem with her being in this list. I can't think of any others where I'm like, oh yeah, they should definitely be in this particular list. Um, I will say, like, it seems like this list is sort of lacking wingers, but that's kind of one of the tough things that comes with all decade teams like this is one of the main metrics that you can really use to pick these players is the number of goals they score. Wingers' main job really isn't to score. Like, for example, over the course of the decade, Megan Rapinoe and Tobin Heath, just to name a few, they've scored like a third of the goals that Alex Morgan has, which isn't really an argument to say that they shouldn't be in this list, but when you're making these all-decade team lists, that's where it gets a little interesting, and it makes you wonder what the metric is or what the metrics are that these organizations pick these teams. But by and large, like I said, I have really no problem with Alex Morgan being included in this list. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. Moving on to Ada Hegerberg, she has scored over 200 goals this decade, which is absolutely astounding. Most of which have been with club because she has had a lot of problems with the international Norwegian side, which I don't blame her because they've just got a lot of stuff to work out, and I don't blame her for not wanting to play with them. But nevertheless, she scored over 200 goals in the decade. How do you argue against that? She scored FIFA Pro Awards. She scored big UEFA awards over the last 5 years. If she was left off this list, I would just question the credibility of the list entirely. So, I mean, to me, Ada Hegerberg was the no-brainer. She should definitely be in this list. When he scored that many goals in a decade, that's incredible. Even the course of a career, that's amazing. So for her to do it in one decade, that's awesome. And then last but not least, we have one of the GOATs of women's football, which is going to be Marta dos Santos of Brazil. She's one of the like I said, she's one of the GOATs. I would say that she's approaching the twilight of her career now. She had a really good decade from 2000 to 2010, and then now I would say she's had a good enough decade in 2010 through 2020 that she should also be in this list. She carried Brazil in the 2012 London Olympics, if I'm thinking of the right matchup. She almost won it for them against the U.S., but then one of the greatest moments in U.S. soccer history happened when Abby Wambach scored that header. So, I mean, if that doesn't happen, then Marta, that just strengthens her argument even more. But her performance in that match cannot be overstated. It was incredible. She has won 2-time FIFA Player of the Year awards in this decade, which that in itself is a huge accomplishment. And she's won it like 4 other times in the previous decade. So she's consistently been one of the world's best players for a long time, including this decade. And she's also been named to the FIFA Pro World 11 3 times. So just with those awards alone, and plus she's scored over 150 goals this decade to top it off too. So even just by goal scoring alone, it's like this would be another case where if Marta was left off this list, even as a midfielder, I'd be fine with her being a midfielder. It would kind of damage the credibility in this list for me personally. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a list, but still, big prestigious award. It's really cool to see all these players who have shined over the last decade and what these organizations think and how they measure these different players. So, guys, that's the IFFHS All-Decade team for 2011 through 2020. What did you think of the list? Feel free to jump down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Maybe who got snubbed, maybe who shouldn't be on this list. Feel free to just let me know down in the comments below. So, with the first main topic, and hang on, I'm stumbling over my words today. With the first main topic down and out of the way, let's get into the second main topic. Now let's get into the craziness that was match week 14 of the FAWSL. Wow, this week was absolutely insane for matches. There's top table drama, there's bottom table drama. There were 3 upsets, I would argue, that went down this weekend, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. This season has been arguably one of the best WSL seasons in recent memory, if you look back a few years, and I wouldn't want to have it any other way, even if my Manchester United lost today. But let's talk about the results before we get into general observations. So to kick off the weekend, we had Aston Villa and Tottenham. Aston Villa won by a scoreline of 1-0. Mana Iwabuchi scored in the 12th minute of the match, giving Aston Villa an early lead, and it turns out that's all they need to secure the 3 points, which they desperately needed because they were in the bottom 3 going into the weekend. And whenever bottom bottom table teams need those points and they get them, it's always good to see for their clubs, boost the confidence a little. Moving on to one of the upsets of the weekend, Manchester United and Reading. For those of you who may or may not know, I am a Manchester United fan through and through, both on the women's and the men's side of the coin. Oh, my Man United, they just could not get it together today. Couldn't do it. They weren't having it. Passes were going left. Passes were going right. While players were going right. While the passes were going left. Not a lot was clicking on all cylinders. Not a lot was making sense. And they paid the price for it today. They lost today by scoreline of 2 to Reading's 0. United just couldn't really get it together. I don't really know how to explain it. There were at least 5 or 6 occasions where I would see long balls being sent to the left wing to Leah Galton from the midfield, and Leah Galton would just be kind of caught flat-footed, and the ball would just keep rolling, and she was nowhere near it. To me, that just screams miscommunication problems. And what really confirmed that was I would see Kristen Press kind of do the same thing. She would send balls forward, or she'd go to receive balls, and she would stop, and then they'd make the pass, and the ball would just go wayward. I don't know what happened to them today. Miscommunication tactic. There's something wrong. And in the second half, I think Casey Stoney, when it was still 0-0 in the second half, I think Casey Stoney brought on a couple of attack-minded players in Jackie Groen and Jess Sigsworth to kind of help turn the tide to score that first goal. It was a bit of a gamble, but I don't blame her because United were on the front foot pretty much all game up until that point in time. But just a couple minutes later, that's when Reading scored 2 goals in 2 minutes and really turned the tide. So it was a gamble that didn't really pan out, but that happens. It's football. It's just United, they just straight up just played poorly today and they lost the match. So what were some of the highlights? Let me be a little bit more clear. So Natasha Harding in the 63rd minute scored a goal off of a corner. The United backline was a little discombobulated. There's a lot of traffic, so she headed it in and opened the scoring. Then, just 2 minutes later, off of a free kick, Danielle Carter scores a header in the 65th minute to make it 2-0 really, really quickly. And United, after that, just could not recover. Full credit to Reading, though. It seemed as though that they learned quite a bit from the previous encounter with United. The last time out was closer than the scoreline suggested. The reverse fixture was Manchester United 2, Reading 0, but it wasn't really, to me, a super convincing win. You could tell United was struggling a little bit. This is when they actually still had, this was the last game Tobin Heath played before she got injured, but nonetheless, you could tell that Reading adapted and adjusted really well, so full credit to them for being able to get a much-needed 3 points for them to remain 6th and get a little bit closer to Everton in that 5th spot. So it was quite an upset. I fully expected United to win this game, and with them trying to get that title spot, they had a lot more to play for today than Reading did. So I'm really surprised that they didn't come away with anything. And to be honest, I don't think they deserved to win by the way that they played or even draw because they just played so poorly today. But like I said, that happens. That's football, and then we move on and learn from there. But what I was thinking is, okay, now that United have lost, their title chances are starting to crumble until Chelsea lost. That's right. Chelsea took on Brighton just about 20 minutes after their game. The United game ended, and Chelsea was bested by Brighton by a scoreline of 2-1. Just after Manchester United lays an egg and just blows it, you fully expect with the form that Chelsea's been on, winning their last 8 of 8 matches in all competitions, you're like, well, they're going to roll over Brighton, who just lost 3-0 to bottom of the barrel Bristol City. And Brighton this is the biggest upset one of the biggest upsets I've ever seen in the world of soccer. With Brighton winning today, that is a massive result for them. But let's talk about the highlights before I talk about the implications. So Sam Kerr opened scoring really early for Chelsea in the 5th minute, which at that point you can't help but think, here we go again. Here's Chelsea going to steamroll another team in this league and just best them by a scoreline of 5-0, 6-0, much like City's been doing lately. But then just 3 minutes later, Brighton answer very, very quickly. Aileen Whalen tied the scoring in the 8th minute to give Brighton a little bit of shining hope. And then now, fast forward about 70 minutes later, that's right, in the 78th minute, Megan Connolly breaks the deadlock and goes ahead and puts Brighton up by a scoreline of 2-1. And it turns out that's all they needed to secure the 3 points on the day, which I'm still buzzing about it. That's just a crazy result. Like I said, so for those of you who don't have the context, last week out, Brighton plays Bristol City. They lose to Bristol City. Bristol City at that point was bottom of the table, negative 49 goal difference, and they get clean sheeted by Bristol City by a scoreline of 3-0. Players getting red cards, morale being really low, and you're thinking, I myself just last week was saying, wow, Brighton, there's a chance they could get relegated. They've got no games in hand with Bristol and all the teams below them still having 2 or 3 games in hand. There's a chance they could get relegated. And then what do the very next week? They respond, I think, better than any other team could. They go ahead after losing to the bottom of the barrel team in the league and beat the top team in the league who hasn't lost in the WSL in like 2 years. What a response. What a response. It seriously, it does not get much better than that. What better way to change the morale and the momentum around your club than to beat the best team in the league and gain a much needed 3 points? It doesn't get much better than that, folks. It really, really doesn't. And that just more supports my argument that this has been one of the best WSL seasons in recent memory. There's drama at the top of the table. There's bottom at the bottom of the table. The top 4 teams are fighting each other. The bottom 4 teams, I'd argue the bottom 5, 6 teams are fighting each other to stay out of the relegation zone. So keep your eyes peeled for the next 9 weeks because it's going to be a wild ride. There's about 9 match weeks left in the WSL, not including makeup games, of course, because there's quite a few games that need to be made up. But this result, you can't write stuff like this. This is just crazy. So do I think that with this loss, Chelsea still have a chance to win the league? Of course. In fact, I'd still say that they're probably the favorites to win the league at this point in the season. You don't win a title without having some bumps in the road. I still have got them winning it all, but time will tell because City's gaining fast, which makes for an excellent transition because that moves us into the game of the week, which was Arsenal taking on the Galactic Empire that is Manchester City. Manchester City won this match by a scoreline of 2 to Arsenal's 1, much to the chagrin and heartbreak of Arsenal fans everywhere, which I know that's not an easy result to swallow because Arsenal, I would say, have had pretty low morale around the club lately. Players are trying to get their contracts sorted. Matches are getting canceled because of weather, which to me is absolutely ridiculous. And then COVID implications have been going on. Things are just not going well for Arsenal at the minute. But let's talk about the highlights. Ellen White opened the scoring in the 24th minute. Chloe Kelly steams down the right-hand side of the pitch, gives a beautiful cross into her. Ellen White takes advantage, nails it at the top of the crossbar, not the top of the crossbar, the bottom of the crossbar, and goes in for goal and does her classic celebration, which for those of you who don't know, I will demonstrate visually, which is you take both of your hands, you make goggles with them with your pinky, ring, and middle fingers out while making a circle motion with your index and thumb, putting them over your eyes like goggles and going like this. I love Ellen White's celebration. It's simple, effective, and real. And for those of you listening on audio, I hope that was a good enough verbal translation into Ellen White's celebration that you could imitate it in the car or at work as you're watching this right now. So anyways, moving on early into the second half, in the 57th minute, Caitlin Ford does what all Arsenal fans were hoping that she would do. She ties the scoring in the 57th minute. I forgot who she got the cross from, but she made Ellie Roebuck miss the save, and she goes to the lower right-hand corner of the net. And Caitlin Ford has been, I would say, part of the backbone of Arsenal this season. There are just some unsung heroes that quietly do what you'd like every player to do and just help the team up and down the pitch. And Caitlin Ford is one of those players, I'd argue, for Arsenal this season. She's been massive, and she just proves it again with this big score that she gets. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough because if we fast forward to the 79th minute, Chloe Kelly gets the best of the left back of Arsenal, steams up the pitch, gets all the way to the goal line, crosses it into Lauren Hemp, who finishes it with a phenomenal header all the way in the 79th minute, which was huge because that secured Manchester City's 2-1 victory over Arsenal and perhaps maybe even cemented City's place into Champions League glory for next season. This result, overall implications for the rest of this result was huge. Like this, I would say that this game was probably a bigger deal for Arsenal than it was Manchester City because Arsenal have already kind of been dropping down in the table a little bit as the weeks have gone on, and if they got a win here and they got a win next week, because I believe they play Chelsea next week in another big match, it really propels them and really increases their chance for the Champions League spot. I said in the last podcast episode, whoever wins this will probably end up being in the Champions League next season. I stand by that. with this win, I'm pretty convinced that Manchester City have the drive, they have the tools, they have the talent, and they are on the right form right now in order to bring this thing home and win and get to a Champions League spot. Do I think City have a chance to win the title? I think they do. There's a chance. Is it as strong of a chance as Chelsea does? Not really, at least not in my opinion right now. That could change as time goes on. But it's just so damaging to Arsenal's morale. They When you're losing to another top club in these circumstances, it's never fun for any team. When you're vying for that Champions League spot, you want to keep players happy, and you lose at a time like this. It's hard. It's really hard, especially when your last three matches have been unfairly postponed or canceled or what have you, and you're coming off a month hiatus. You might be a little bit rusty, you might be a little bit frustrated, and things just aren't going well at the club right now. You've got players who are trying to figure out their contracts and whatnot. It's not a good feeling for them. They just couldn't quite get it done today, and it's really damaging since there's 9 weeks left. If they win next week, I think it helps their case a little bit more. However, it's getting a little bit late in the season for them to be getting cold. They're getting cold at the wrong time. That's the best way I can sum it up at this point. Is they're just getting cold at the wrong time, and they could definitely use a few wins going down the stretch for the rest of the season. However, on the other side of the coin, for Manchester City, like I said, this just kind of cements their place, at least in my mind, that they are a contender for the title and that they will be in the Champions League next season. They took full advantage of United and Chelsea both losing today, and they gained some very much needed ground to get up to that title race and be a serious contender. And I got to give credit to City here. They've gotten red hot at the exact right moment. There's no better way to get hot at this point in the season when you're already contending and everybody else is getting cold. Like, there's no better time to play really, really well, and they're doing exactly that. All their players are. Everybody's playing really well at this point. If they beat the big thing for me will be next week. There's the Manchester Derby. That's going to be another big result for them. If they can come away with a win at that game too, I mean, the sky's the limit. Then at that point, that's going to bring them that much closer to Chelsea. And then I think that for the remainder of the season, then if they do beat United next week, it's going to be a clash between Chelsea and City that will decide the league. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how that goes, given the form that United have been on. United have been a little inconsistent in the last few weeks, and City have been red hot and destroying everybody. I wouldn't be surprised if City beat United next week. However, I will say City, unless they're playing Arsenal, seem to crumble against United and Chelsea. They've proven that a few times in the past, so next week's derby is going to be big, and it's going to be really, really interesting. It's gonna feel like a championship game in itself, so stay tuned for that, guys. It's going to be amazing. Moving on to the second last match of the weekend, we have Everton and Birmingham City. This was probably one of the lesser exciting games of the week, just because it's two mid-table teams who haven't really been playing great. Neither one of them have really been all that in a bag of chips recently. This match ended in a draw. Everton won, Birmingham City won. Not really a ton went on. Daniel Turner opened the scoring midway through the first half in the 22nd minute. And Jamie Lee Napier, about 10 minutes later, leveled the scoring, and that's pretty much all she wrote for the match. Jill Scott picked up a yellow card in her second consecutive match. So, Birmingham City, whichever player she fouled, was sure to be feeling that in the morning because it probably hurt, but not really a ton going on there. Those two keep their spots in the table, if I'm not mistaken. But moving on to one of the more interesting matches of the week, and the last match that went down, it just finished about an hour ago, was West Ham's United and Bristol City. Also ended in a draw at 1-1. I had Bristol City riding their wave of momentum and winning this game by scoreline of 2-1. However, I was wrong and they drew, which, when you're a team at the bottom of the table and you're at least getting a point each week, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad sign. I got to give full credit to both teams, because at this point in the season, with 9 matches remaining, every point counts, right? And for them to draw to each other, it's a step in the right direction in their quest to avoid relegation. However, I think a win would have been much more dramatic for either side at this point. Like, if West Ham walks away with 3 points, that helps their relegation case a lot. If Bristol City walks away with 3 points, I think it makes the league a lot more interesting, which is why I think I was hoping Bristol City would win this match. But nevertheless, what were some of the highlights? Early on in the 7th minute, Bristol City got a goal off of Emily Van Egmond of West Ham. It was an own goal. It was early on in the 7th minute, so just a little bit of bad luck for West Ham's. And then Catarina Svitkova picked up the pieces in the 49th minute with a Oh, excuse me, with a goal. And then that pretty much did it for the match. I hope I said Catarina's name right. Catarina Stvitkova. Where is she from? Sorry, guys. I'm doing a little aside here. I believe it was from Catarina Stvitkova. This is why Google is my best friend at this point. She's Czech. Okay, that makes a ton of sense. Just she is from Europe originally. But hope I said her name right. But yeah, she picked up the pieces for West Ham in the 49th minute, scored a goal, and helped them secure a point and rescue a point. So I'd say that was a big turnaround for West Ham, and good on them for leveling the score. So, guys, with all of the craziness that was the WSL Match Week 14, what does the table now look like? Let's take a look here. I will pull it up and read it aloud. So, in first, we have Chelsea with a game in hand at 32 points. In second, we've got Manchester United with no games in hand, tied on points, but in second on goal differential at 32 points. In third, we've got Manchester City with a game in hand at 30 points. In fourth, we've got Arsenal with 2 games in hand at 23 points. In fifth, we've got Everton, 2 games in hand, 18 points. In sixth, we've got Reading, no games in hand at 18 points. In seventh, we've got Tottenham Hotspur, 2 games in hand at 12 points. In eighth, we've got Brighton and Hove Albion with no games in hand and 12 points. In ninth, we've got Birmingham City, 3 games in hand at 11 points. In 10th, we've got Aston Villa, 2 games in hand with 10 points. Then in 11th, we've got West Ham's United with 2 games in hand at 8 points. And then in last, at the 12th spot, we've got Bristol City with a game in hand at 6 points. So crazy stuff going on at the top and the bottom of the table. Bristol City are 2 points away from safety, but that becomes a lot more ambiguous because all the teams from 9 all the way through 11th in the table all have games in hand, like 2 or 3, while Bristol City's only got 1. So it's going to come down to the wire for the end of the season. So, guys, how do you think the season's going to shape up by the end? Feel free to jump down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. I still have Bristol City getting relegated, unfortunately, but that is neither here nor there. Let's get into the last main topic of the podcast episode. We're going to be sticking with the WSL at this particular point, and this main topic is going to be all about the Leah Williamson transfer rumors that have surfaced this particular week. So, let's provide a little bit of context. So, a few players at Arsenal are approaching the end of their contracts. I believe this summer is when a lot of them are expiring. There's 6 months at most for a couple players, including Jill Roord, Leah Williamson, and also Manuel Zinsberger, who actually just signed an extension, so she's got a deal sorted. But that leaves Jill Roord and Leah Williamson's contracts are up at the summertime. When your contracts are that close to expiring, you're a high-profile player on a high-profile team, and you still don't have a deal yet with your current club, it's bound to start some speculation up, and it's bound to attract other teams' attention from around the world. In this particular place, I believe Wolfsburg, Lyonnais, and one other team were interested, another high-profile club. I want to say Juventus, but I could be wrong on that. Nevertheless, and justifiably so, with all that in mind, Leah Williamson's been attracting attention from top European clubs. When you're that close to the end of the deal and your team isn't going to sign you, of course top teams are going to come and try to gain your interest because they can get you on a transfer for nothing. They can get it to you for free. I'm going to explain a little bit about that really quick before I go into more details. For those of you who might be newer to the transfer market business in the world of European and women's soccer that's not in the US, so what the transfer market is it's essentially the trade market in American sports. You can purchase players from teams for an agreed upon dollar amount. So, for example, if I wanted to buy Viviane Miedema from Arsenal as Olympique Lyonnais, I could say, okay, I'm Olympique Lyonnais, Arsenal Football Club. I will give you $80 million for us to have Viviane Miedema. If Arsenal likes the deal, they'll say yes, the transfer is complete, and then I can negotiate a contract with Viviane Miedema. When the player is not under contract with any team, so for example, in this case, Leah Williamson, say her contract expires in July. Well, as soon as her contract expires, any team can just go and negotiate with her. You don't have to talk to the team anymore. You can just go and negotiate directly with a player. And then by doing that, you don't have to pay that big $80 million transfer fee anymore. That's just an arbitrary number. It might be any number, but you save yourself a ton of money that way because you don't have to pay a transfer fee. You can just pay the player's contract whatever they want, and it saves you a lot of money. It's a really effective and really highly used strategy in the world of football in general. But um, I just wanted to explain that as a side to set the scene a little bit more. But with all this going down, it begs the question: will Leah Williamson leave Arsenal at the end of the season? And honestly, the way things are going, she just might. I mean, if I'm her, I would. Then again, I am not her, obviously, but I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it at all. She stated on record, according to some articles I've been reading on Arsenal's football club's website, that she wouldn't want to play for another WSL team. So if you don't want to play for another WSL team, you have to go international. You got to go to other countries in the world, Italy, France, the US, maybe. It only gives her one option: other leagues from around the globe if you don't want to play for anybody else in the WSL. And the club morale at the moment, like I said, it's pretty low. When you're at the top of your game and you're early on in your career, like Leah Williamson is, she's only 23 at the minute, and you're in a consistent international star like she is with England, and your matches are getting canceled due to weather conditions and your pitch not being up to standard. I don't know that for sure that the pitch isn't up to standard, but if your matches are getting canceled when you're in the top flight of a league like the WSL and your games are getting canceled, that's just not cool. Like, that's not okay. When you're a professional like that, that shouldn't happen. That can be a turnoff for a lot of international stars. Nobody wants to go to a club where it's like, it gives off the impression that the club's not taken seriously. The club's just not taken seriously, and that can just be a turnoff for players, and I don't blame them. For your match to be getting canceled because of weather, that's unacceptable. Unless it's tornadoes literally destroying your pitch. That's a whole nother story entirely. That's a natural disaster. That's not weather. Like snow falling and rain waterlogging your pitch, that's just not cool. That's a huge turnoff for players, and that's not okay. And it's just lowering the morale of the club. They're not getting results. They've only come away with 7 of the last 15 points, and that just, it doesn't help the case to keep for some of these players to want to stay at all. Another thing that crosses my mind is Arsenal's, why as a club are you letting players of the caliber of Leah Williamson and Jill Ward, why are you letting their contracts go down to even a year without at least having them re-sign? That's insane to me. You don't let players get down to a month on their contract, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months, and then start thinking, oh, we might want to resign them. By then, it's almost too late, because when you have players you want and you intend to keep, you just don't let their contracts get that far down to the wire, because from a negotiation standpoint, it gives them all of the power, right? Um, which I'm not opposed to having players have power. It's just from a negotiation standpoint, it just makes a lot more sense, because if you're at their contracts run the slow, you're risking them going away on a free transfer, like what I mentioned earlier. You risk losing them for good and not getting any money out of it at all. At least if she wants to leave and she's under contract, at least you can get the transfer fee from her wanting to leave, which is totally perfect and cool. But when you let their contracts get this low, it gives the player all the leverage in terms of negotiations. I just want to be clear on this. I am not having a problem with players having leverage and having power. You should have the fate to decide where you want to go. It's just from a club standpoint, if you really intend and care about these players and you want to keep them, you get their deals sorted as soon as you possibly can. You keep them as happy as you can. And in this case, they're just not doing that with Leah or Jill, I would argue, which to me is just, it's fishy. It doesn't make a ton of sense. Let's talk a little bit more about the leverage in negotiating in this point. So what do I mean by saying that it's giving players more leverage by letting their contracts get down to only having 6 months or less left? Well, the first piece of that is the free transfer. What the players could do is, if they're not happy at the club and they want to leave, they could just let their contract expire. And if they just let their contract expire, the club loses that opportunity to sell them for a transfer fee to another club. They lose out on that money. That's just one piece of it, which the financial implications of that is just huge, because you're losing out on millions of dollars that you can use to go out and buy other talent from around the world. That's huge. The second part about that is, it gives the player the leverage to just sort of wait it out, so to speak. Now, with the club at Arsenal, or with the morale at Arsenal being low right now, and their Champions League uncertainty being a little bit high at this point too, Leah could just tell her agent, you know what, stop negotiations for Arsenal. I want to see if we make it to the Champions League, and if we do, I'll re-sign, but if not, I'll leave and I'll just go away for free. It's giving her that power and that leverage in order to just make that call and basically leave the club's financial implications in the balance. Which I really don't care. If Arsenal doesn't make any money off of a Leah Williamson transfer, I could care less. But it's just the reality from that club's standpoint. It's like, why wouldn't you sign this player earlier and keep her happy? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And they're shooting themselves in the foot, is essentially what I'm trying to say in this process. And it just it makes me ask so many different questions, like, why aren't deals getting done? Is it the board being cheap? I've seen that as a Manchester United fan on the men's side. The Glazer family has arguably been cheap in the past, or they've just made bonehead deals, or they've tried to be cheap and they've only shot themselves in the foot. Is the same case happening at Arsenal Football Club? It could be. I don't know that for sure, but it could be. I don't know enough about Arsenal's club in general to make that call, but it just begs that question. On the other hand, is the club being poorly run? Are they unwilling to give resources? The reason why I say that is because they're already not, I would argue they're probably not pulling enough resources into the facilities and the pitch if their games are getting canceled due to the weather. With that in mind, why should I believe that they're giving all the resources and money that they can to sign players? It's just fishy to me. Like, why? It seems like very basic things that a top club like Arsenal should be doing that they're really not doing and should be doing. That's a valid criticism, I think, on the club, and it's just not. They're not. I just don't think the execution for them to be a top club is proper at this point. They could just be sorting things out. They could be transitioning the club, but who knows? I guess only time will tell. And I've been seeing quotes too that Joe Montemurro has been saying, like, he's confident that they're gonna get a deal done for Leah. I mean, I will say the one ship that he has in making that claim is they just re-signed Manuela Zinsberger, who is a top goalkeeping talent and a young one at the age of 25 in the WSL. Just signed her to a long-term deal. She seems to be happy with the deal, so they are getting deals done. So that's the silver lining to all of this. But with Joe saying he's confident that they're going to re-sign Leah Williamson, if he genuinely means that, then awesome, like, all power to him. But I've never seen a coach say, no, yeah, we're not going to re-sign this great player that we have. No coach is going to go out and say that. That's just not, that's a nightmare. You just wouldn't say that. So I'm not saying Joe's lying by any means. It's just, you wouldn't say the opposite. Of course you're going to be confident that they're going to re-sign Leah, and you have all the confidence in the world. It's just, will it happen? Time will tell. But I will say, with them re-signing Zinsberger and as talented as she is, it certainly supports his claim that they're going to be confident they're going to re-sign Leah. So will they re-sign Leah Williamson and Jill Roord? It's anybody's guess at this point. I will say I wouldn't be surprised if Leah Williamson and Jill Roord left and let their contracts expire, given the way things at Arsenal are going. However, the next 9 weeks could go by. They could win out. They could win the next 9 games. All could be hunky-dory again at Arsenal Football Club, and they could all stay. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, for all my Arsenal fans out there, I'm wishing the best for you, because this can't be a fun time for the club right now. But I will say, winning cures everything. Winning cures any problem in the world of sports. So if Arsenal just keep winning matches, I think everything will sort itself out. But if they keep losing and morale keeps dropping, the jury will be out, and we'll see what kind of goes on from there. Guys, if there are any other Arsenal players whose contracts are running out, feel free to drop down in the comments below. Or if you have any thoughts on the Leah Williamson transfer rumors and whether they're valid or not, feel free to jump down in the comments and let me know as well. I am no Arsenal expert. I mainly get a broader focus in the WSL, so feel free to enlighten me or educate me. I'm always okay with starting that dialogue. So I greatly appreciate it, and feel free to jump down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys, so we're approaching an hour here, and that brings us to the end of the episode. I just want to say in closing, thank you so much, so much for taking the time and spending it with me to listen to this podcast or watch it on YouTube. If you like what you're hearing and seeing, I will link down all of our other social media platforms down in the description below. For those of you who are watching our video and want to listen on audio at work, or if you're traveling, we have audio on every major platform that you can think of as well. I'll also link those down below. One other thing is there were no mailbag questions this week. If you guys would like to ask a question and feature it on the show, I will also link a form down in the description below that you can fill out and ask any question that you'd like to be featured on the show, as long as it's appropriate and applicable. I will do my best to answer it if I get it before the bye week or the twice a week shows on time. I film these usually on Wednesdays and Sundays. But like I said, thank you so much. I've been Bryce. This has been the Women's Soccer / Football Podcast. And as always, have a great day.